On a quiet Saturday afternoon in a small Montana town, a former U.S. Marine thought he had left his battles behind. He was just a mechanic now, a father, a man trying to rebuild a simple life with his daughter and his loyal canine at his side. But when a single act of humiliation inside a café is twisted online, it sparks a chain of retaliation that threatens everything he loves: his garage, his reputation, and even his child. This is not a story about revenge. It's about restraint, about what happens when a trained warrior is pushed to the edge and chooses who he wants to be. Before the story begins, tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe to follow a journey where survival turns into responsibility, and one choice changes everything. Cold sunlight washed over Main Street, turning the windows of a small Bozeman cafe into sheets of pale gold. Ethan Cole sat at a corner table near the wall, the seat chosen the way he chose every seat: back protected, exits visible without turning his head. At 45, he carried the solid, grounded build of a man who had once worn 80 pounds of gear across Afghan mountains and never complained about it. His dark brown hair was clipped short, already streaked faintly with gray at the temples, and a trimmed beard framed a jaw that had been broken once and healed slightly crooked. A thin scar ran along his left wrist, pale against sun-browned skin. He wore a tan canvas work jacket smudged with oil, a gray thermal shirt beneath it, and jeans worn thin at the knees. Even seated, he seemed balanced, like a coiled spring that had learned patience. At his feet lay Rex, a 7-year-old German shepherd with sable fur, black layered over deep rust, and amber eyes that missed nothing. Rex had served beside Ethan during his final deployment. A faint notch marked one ear, a souvenir from shrapnel years ago. The dog's body appeared relaxed, chin on paws, but his ears flicked at every shift in the room. Loyalty radiated from him, quiet and absolute. Ethan lifted his coffee. The mug warmed his calloused fingers, hands that had rebuilt engines and rebuilt parts of himself since leaving the Marines. He owned a modest garage 2 blocks away, Cole Auto Repair, where mornings began before sunrise and ended when the last engine cooled. He preferred engines to people. Engines were honest. They failed for reasons. They could be fixed. He checked his watch, 2 hours before he picked up Emma from her grandmother's house. Emma, 12 now, tall for her age, with her mother's soft hazel eyes and Ethan's stubborn chin. Sarah had been slender and strong-willed, with chestnut hair she wore in a loose braid, freckles dusted across fair skin. A congenital heart condition had taken her 5 years ago. She had smiled through hospital monitors and told Ethan, in that steady voice of hers, "Promise me you'll stay gentle." He had promised. Some days, that promise felt heavier than body armor. The cafe door swung open with a jangle. Cold air swept in first, followed by Ryan Mercer. At 33, Ryan still had the broad shoulders and thick neck of a former college linebacker. His blonde hair was cut short, but styled with too much product, and faint acne scars marked his flushed cheeks. A knee injury had ended his athletic career early. Since then, he had drifted between part-time jobs and weekend bar fights, nursing resentment like a private inheritance. Confidence came easily to him, but it was brittle, easily cracked. Behind Ryan came Travis Holt, narrow-faced and quick-eyed, with a patchy beard he seemed overly proud of. Travis carried his phone in his hand like a second limb, forever filming, forever searching for something that might go viral. Caleb Dunn followed last, tall, pale, with sandy hair that fell into his eyes. He had moved to Bozeman 3 months ago, recently hired at Ethan's garage. Caleb spoke little, shoulders often hunched as if apologizing for taking up space. Ryan spotted Ethan immediately. His gaze lingered on the oil stains, on Rex, on the scar at Ethan's wrist. A grin curved his mouth. He changed course deliberately, veering toward the corner instead of the sugar counter. Ethan saw the angle, the shift in balance, the telegraphed intent. He could have moved his cup. He didn't. Ryan's hip slammed into the table. Coffee splashed, dark liquid spreading across Ethan's jacket and dripping to the floor. Travis's laughter rang sharp and eager. Caleb gave a weak half-smile. Phones lifted around the room. "Didn't see you there," Ryan said loudly, though his eyes were fixed on Ethan's face. "Guess old Marines blend into the furniture." Ethan rose slowly. He dabbed at the stain with a napkin. His expression remained blank, not passive, but measured. Inside, something old stirred. The clinical awareness of distance, weight distribution, breathing patterns. He pressed it down. Not worth it. Emma needed him calm. Ryan stepped closer, breath sour with last night's beer. "You deaf too?" He shoved Ethan's shoulder. Rex's head lifted. A low growl vibrated from his chest. Restrained, but unmistakable. Across the room, a woman in her mid-30s pulled her young son closer. The boy, perhaps 7, stared wide-eyed, clutching a crayon. Ethan noticed him. He always noticed the smallest details. Ryan kicked a chair in frustration when Ethan did not react. The chair skidded, startling the child into tears. That sound cut deeper than the shove. Ethan felt it like a blade under his ribs. He remembered Emma at 8, small fingers gripping his hand at her mother's funeral. He remembered promising to be the kind of strength that didn't frighten children. Ryan's fist came fast and wide, a haymaker thrown for spectacle. Time narrowed. Ethan tilted his head, the punch slicing air past his ear. He stepped forward instead of back, seized Ryan's wrist, twisted outward and down. 4 seconds. That was all. Ryan's balance collapsed. His body met the hardwood floor with a hard thud. Ethan pinned him with controlled pressure, knee centered, arm secured. No strike, no excess force. Just certainty. The cafe fell silent except for Ryan's labored breathing. Travis stopped laughing. Caleb's face drained of color. Someone whispered, "Call the cops." Ethan's voice was low. "Stay down." Sirens arrived within minutes. Officer Daniel Hayes, 40, square-jawed with graying temples and the steady gaze of a former Army MP, assessed the scene. Witnesses spoke at once, confirming Ryan had thrown the first punch. Hayes cuffed Ryan for misdemeanor assault. As Ryan was led toward the door, humiliation burning in his eyes, he twisted his head toward Ethan. "You just messed with the wrong family," he muttered. Ethan watched him go, pulse steady again, Rex at his side. He picked up his cooled coffee and sat back down, hands still. He checked his watch. Plenty of time to wash up before picking up Emma. He had kept his promise, gentle, controlled, unbroken. He did not yet know that by nightfall, Ryan Mercer would be out on bail. 2 nights after the incident at the cafe, a hard wind moved through Bozeman, rattling the loose metal sign above Cole Auto Repair and pushing dust against the garage doors like restless fingers. Ethan Cole was still awake when the call came, though he had been lying flat on his back staring at the ceiling, the way he used to in barracks overseas when sleep refused to settle. It was 2:17 a.m. The security alarm company's voice was calm, automated, detached. Motion detected inside the building. Ethan was already out of bed before the message finished. Rex was on his feet even faster, muscles tight beneath sable fur, a low, alert rumble building in his chest. Ethan drove the 2 blocks to the garage in his old Ford pickup, headlights cutting through the wind. The building stood dark and silent, roll-up doors closed. Nothing appeared broken from the street. He killed the engine and stepped out, breath fogging in the cold air. Rex moved ahead of him, nose working, tail low but rigid. The front entrance was locked. No shattered glass. Ethan circled toward the back. The rear service door was closed, but the latch showed faint scoring near the frame, almost invisible unless someone knew what to look for. Ethan did. He had spent years reading smaller signs than that. He unlocked it and stepped inside, flicking on the lights. The fluorescent buzz filled the empty space. Tools were in place, toolboxes unopened, cash drawer untouched, shelves of parts undisturbed. Nothing stolen. That unsettled him more than if the place had been cleaned out. Then he saw the sedan in Bay 3. A silver 2016 Subaru Outback belonging to a school teacher named Mrs. Elena Martinez, a soft-spoken woman in her late 40s with careful brown curls and patient eyes. She had left the car that morning for routine brake pad replacement. Ethan approached the vehicle slowly. The hood was closed, but something felt wrong. He crouched near the front wheel and looked behind it. The brake line had been severed cleanly. Not ripped, not corroded. Cut. Precision. His jaw tightened. If Mrs. Martinez had picked up that vehicle without inspection, the failure would not have shown immediately. It would have revealed itself at speed. A downhill stretch, a red light, a child in a crosswalk. Ethan felt heat rise behind his eyes. Not rage yet, but something colder. This wasn't theft. This was intent. Officer Daniel Hayes arrived within minutes, lights flashing briefly before going dark. Hayes stepped out, coat collar up against the wind. He was tall, solidly built, early 40s, with iron gray at his temples and a nose that had been broken at least once. His posture carried quiet authority rather than show. Years ago, before joining Bozeman PD, he had served as a military police officer in Iraq. The discipline had never left him. He entered the garage with steady steps and listened without interruption as Ethan explained what he had found. "No tools missing?" Hayes asked. "Nothing," Ethan replied. "Just the brake line." Hayes exhaled slowly. "That's felony vandalism, if we can prove intent to cause harm." He glanced at the rear door. "Any cameras?" Ethan walked him toward the ceiling corner. The small security camera hung lifeless, wire dangling. The cable had been cut cleanly, not yanked. Hayes ran a hand over his jaw. "Who knew about this job?" "Anyone who walked in today?" Ethan paused. "And my employees." He said the last word carefully. Caleb Dunn had worked for him 3 weeks. 22 years old, thin and pale, sandy hair that never seemed fully combed. Caleb kept to himself, rarely made eye contact, hands always trembling slightly when customers spoke directly to him. Ethan had assumed it was shyness. Caleb had mentioned once in a quiet offhand comment that he had dropped out of a community college auto program after his father's death in a hunting accident. Since then, he had drifted between towns. "Where's the kid tonight?" Hayes asked. "He said he left early. Headache." Hayes made a note. "I'll talk to him." Ethan didn't say what he was thinking, that cutting a brake line required knowledge. Not expert level, but familiarity. Someone who understood what they were doing. Someone who knew where to cut. After Hayes left, Ethan remained inside. He called Mrs. Martinez personally, waking her gently and telling her not to drive the car until further notice. She sounded shaken, but grateful. He promised to cover any cost. When he hung up, the weight of what might have happened settled into his chest like a stone. Rex suddenly stiffened. A low bark echoed in the empty space. Ethan followed him toward the rear door again. The wind had shifted, carrying a sharp chemical tang. Ethan stepped outside and crouched near the concrete behind the garage. His fingers brushed wetness. He lifted them to his nose. Gasoline. A thin trail led from the back door outward, pooling near the dumpster. Not lit. Not yet. The realization hit with slow clarity. Someone had prepared a second step. Cut the brake line, disable the camera, leave fuel. Either interrupted or reconsidered. Ethan stood, scanning the alley. He imagined flames climbing the wooden rafters, spreading through the shop he had built from nothing after leaving the Marines. Insurance would rebuild walls. It would not rebuild reputation. If the brake sabotage had succeeded, he would have been blamed. He could almost see the headlines. Negligent mechanic, deadly oversight. Rex remained alert, ears forward, eyes scanning shadows. Ethan rested a hand briefly on the dog's neck, grounding himself. "We're not escalating," he murmured. It was unclear whether he spoke to Rex or to himself. The next morning, as Ethan replaced the severed line and triple-checked every vehicle in the shop, his phone vibrated repeatedly. He ignored it until lunch. When he finally looked, there were notifications, messages, tags, missed calls. A video had begun circulating on local social media pages. 10 seconds long, grainy but clear enough. It showed only the moment Ryan Mercer swung and then hit the floor. No shove, no kicked chair, no frightened child. Just Ethan, the Marine mechanic, taking down a larger man with unsettling efficiency. The caption read, "Violent vet loses it in local café." Ethan watched it once without expression. Then he locked his phone and slipped it back into his pocket. Across the shop, Caleb stood unusually still beside a tool cart, watching Ethan from beneath his sandy fringe. When their eyes met, Caleb looked away too quickly. Ethan said nothing. Not yet. Outside, wind pressed against the building again. Inside, the damage was no longer limited to cut metal. The morning after the video began circulating, the sky over Bozeman hung low and colorless, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. Ethan stood inside his office at the back of Cole Auto Repair, staring at his phone screen long enough for the image to burn into memory. 10 seconds. Ryan's body hitting the floor. Nothing before, nothing after. The comment section below it was worse than the footage. Words like unstable, dangerous, violent vet, tossed around casually by people who had never watched a child cry because of a kicked chair. He locked the phone and set it face down on his desk, but the echo of those words remained. At 10:30, his phone rang again. This time it was not social media. It was Margaret Whitmore, his former mother-in-law. Margaret was 63, tall and narrow-shouldered, with silver hair cut precisely at chin length, and pale blue eyes that had never quite forgiven Ethan for surviving when her daughter had not. She carried herself like a woman who had spent her life organizing church committees and school fundraisers, controlled, composed, certain of her moral footing. Since Sarah's death, Margaret had become Emma's primary guardian during the months Ethan worked to rebuild stability. She had never openly fought him, but she had never fully trusted him either. Her voice came measured and polite. "Ethan, we need to talk." He drove to the Whitmore house, a neat two-story place with white siding and trimmed hedges. Emma's bicycle leaned against the porch railing, purple helmet hanging from the handlebars. Inside, the living room smelled faintly of lemon polish and chamomile tea. Emma sat on the couch, long dark hair tied into a messy ponytail, hazel eyes guarded in a way that reminded him painfully of Sarah. At 12, she had grown taller in the past year, limbs lengthening awkwardly. She looked at him with a question she did not speak. Margaret folded her hands in her lap. "Our attorney has seen the video." Ethan felt his chest tighten, but kept his voice even. "It doesn't show what happened before." "That may be," Margaret replied carefully, "but perception matters in custody hearings." Their attorney, Daniel Reeves, joined them via speakerphone. Reeves was in his early 40s, round-faced with thinning, sandy hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He had the slightly anxious cadence of a man who read contracts more fluently than he read people. "Mr. Cole," he began, "the opposing counsel has formally requested a review of your behavior, citing potential anger management concerns. It's procedural, but it complicates things." Ethan's jaw set. He had filed for primary custody 6 months ago, presenting financial records, character references, therapy reports. He had done everything by the book. He had not raised his voice once in the courtroom. Yet now, 10 seconds of edited footage threatened to paint him as something he had spent years unlearning. "I didn't start it," he said quietly. Reeves cleared his throat. "I understand, but the burden is perception. We will need full footage or witness statements." Emma shifted beside him. "Dad, are they saying you hurt someone?" Her voice trembled just slightly, but she held his gaze. Ethan knelt so his eyes met hers. I stopped someone from hurting others. That's all. He remembered Sarah in a hospital bed, pale but steady, telling him strength wasn't about striking first. It was about restraint. He had believed that lesson carved into him permanently. Now he wondered if the world would ever see it the same way. Later that afternoon, Officer Hayes stepped into the garage. He carried a tablet instead of a notepad this time. "We traced the account that uploaded the video," he said without preamble. "It belongs to Travis Holt." Travis, the thin one with the restless grin and constant phone filming, Hayes continued. "The metadata suggests a clip was trimmed before upload." "Meaning?" "Meaning someone removed the first half." Hayes studied Ethan. "This isn't random anymore." Through the open garage bay, Ethan noticed movement across the street. Ryan Mercer leaned against the hood of a black pickup truck, arms folded, ankle crossed over ankle in feigned relaxation. Even from a distance, his posture radiated defiance. He wore a backward baseball cap and a smirk that did not quite reach his eyes. There was a bruise fading yellow along his cheekbone from where Ethan had controlled him. Ryan lifted 2 fingers in a mock salute and smiled wider. He did not approach. He did not speak. He only watched. Ethan felt the old Marine instinct rise again, not toward violence, but toward threat assessment. Ryan was not acting impulsively anymore. He was performing, calculating visibility. Inside the garage, Caleb stood near the tool bench, shoulders hunched as usual. When he noticed Ethan looking at him, he flinched slightly. Caleb's skin appeared paler than before, almost gray beneath fluorescent light. His sandy hair fell across anxious eyes that rarely held contact longer than a second. I might need to leave early again," Caleb muttered. "Head's been killing me." Ethan wiped grease from his hands. "You've been leaving early a lot." Caleb swallowed. "It's just stuff." There was something off. Not guilt exactly, but pressure. Ethan had learned long ago that fear showed itself in small, repetitive movements. Caleb's fingers tapped against his thigh unconsciously. That evening, Ethan returned to the office to review payroll records. Something caught his eye. Caleb's direct deposit account information had changed 2 weeks earlier. Ethan had signed the update without thinking much of it. He opened the transaction history accessible through the payroll system. A deposit, far larger than Caleb's weekly wage, had hit his account 3 days before the garage break-in. Ethan stared at the number. It was not life-changing money, but it was enough to matter to a young mechanic living paycheck to paycheck. He leaned back slowly, mind assembling pieces without jumping ahead. Video posted, brake line cut, gasoline left. Caleb nervous. Ryan watching from across the street. He closed the laptop. He would not accuse without proof, but he would not ignore the pattern either. Outside, dusk settled over Bozeman. Across the street, Ryan's truck was gone. The space where it had been parked looked deceptively ordinary. Ethan locked the garage and stepped into the cooling evening air with Rex at his side. The fight was no longer about pride or humiliation. It was about stability, about the fragile ground beneath Emma's future. Inside his office, the payroll screen still glowed with the transfer amount tied to Caleb Dunn's name. The night Rex disappeared, the air over Bozeman felt unnaturally still, as if even the wind had chosen not to move. Ethan had just finished reviewing paperwork at the small dining table in his modest 1-story house on the edge of town. The house was practical, nothing ornamental. White siding, narrow porch, fenced yard reinforced twice over the past year. Rex usually patrolled that yard before settling near the back door. At 9:30, Ethan realized he had not heard the familiar scratch at the door or the heavy exhale that meant the dog was ready to come in. He stepped onto the porch. The gate at the far end of the yard stood slightly ajar, not forced, unlatched. Ethan walked toward it slowly, every sense sharpening. The padlock hung intact, but the latch had been opened cleanly with a key. Not broken, not climbed over. Someone had known how to get inside without making noise. "Rex," he called once, not loudly. The name fell into the quiet yard without answer. Ethan's pulse did not spike. It compressed. Focus replaced air. He checked the perimeter, scanning for disturbed grass, tire marks, fabric fibers, old habits sliding into place without conscious command. Near the back fence, he saw the faint impression of a boot heel pressed deeper than surrounding soil, not his. He stepped inside and dialed Officer Hayes immediately. Hayes answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the late hour. Ethan explained the gate, the missing dog, the absence of damage. Hayes paused before responding. "If you're suggesting Mercer, I need more than suspicion for a warrant. We'll start paperwork, but it'll take time." "How much time?" Ethan asked evenly. 2, maybe 3 hours for a judge to sign off if we can establish probable cause." 3 hours felt like an eternity, measured against the loyalty of a dog who had once stood between Ethan and incoming fire. Ethan ended the call and returned inside. His phone vibrated before he reached the kitchen counter. Unknown number. A video file attached. No text. He opened it without hesitation. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Rex stood inside what looked like a dim storage unit, chain secured to a metal support beam. The dog's fur bristled, teeth bared in silent warning. Behind him, Ryan Mercer swayed slightly, a bottle hanging from his hand. Travis Holt stood beside him, phone raised, grinning into the lens. Ryan's voice slurred but carried arrogance. "You see this? Marine thinks he's untouchable." He kicked an empty bucket across the concrete floor. Rex lunged, but the chain snapped him back. Travis laughed. Ethan's thumb hovered over the screen. He did not rewatch. He zoomed instead, searching for clues. The wall behind them showed faded lettering from an old towing company, half peeled. A rusted red toolbox sat beneath a broken window. Ethan recognized it. North Ridge Storage, a set of abandoned auto bays 5 miles outside town, closed after a bankruptcy 2 years ago. He dialed Hayes again. "North Ridge Storage," he said. "They row C. I'm sending you the video." "Do not engage," Hayes replied sharply. "Stay put." Ethan did not promise. He sent the location, then grabbed his truck keys. He did not take a weapon. He did not wear tactical gear. He wore his oil-stained jacket and drove. The road to North Ridge cut through flat land with sparse streetlights. Ethan parked 50 yards away, headlights off. The storage complex stood dark except for one flickering bulb near the central corridor. As he approached, he heard music, tinny, distorted, playing from a phone speaker. He stepped into the open bay without announcing himself. Ryan stood near Rex, cheeks flushed, blonde hair disheveled. Travis pivoted immediately, camera raised. Caleb stood near the far wall, hands stuffed into his hoodie pocket, eyes darting between them. Under the harsh light, Caleb looked thinner than ever, jaw clenched tight, as if bracing for something he did not want to witness. Ryan grinned. "Look who showed up." Ethan's gaze never left Rex. The dog's amber eyes locked onto him, tension easing just a fraction. "Let him go," Ethan said calmly. Ryan laughed. "We're live." Travis angled the phone so Ethan's face filled the frame. Comments scrolled rapidly across the screen. "You should have thought twice before embarrassing me," Ryan continued, taking a swig from the bottle. "This is a lesson." Caleb shifted. "Maybe we should just," he began, but Ryan cut him off with a glare. Ethan stepped forward slowly, palms visible, voice steady. "You've made your point." Ryan shoved him hard in the chest. "No, I haven't." He swung without warning, fist wide and unbalanced. Ethan sidestepped, catching Ryan's wrist and rotating it sharply downward. The bottle shattered on concrete. In one controlled motion, Ethan pivoted, swept Ryan's leg, and guided him face first to the floor. Harder than before. Not reckless, but decisive. Travis stumbled backward, still filming. "Whoa!"
Ethan ignored him. He released Ryan's arm only long enough to unhook Rex's chain. The dog sprang forward but stopped at Ethan's command, teeth bared inches from Ryan's face. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Hayes had moved faster than expected. 6 minutes had passed at most. Ryan struggled beneath Ethan's grip, breath ragged.
"You think this is over?" he spat. He turned his head toward Travis's phone. "If he loses the dog," he said, voice thick but audible, "next he loses the kid." The words landed in the air like a thrown blade. Hayes entered seconds later, weapon drawn but lowered once he assessed control. Officers moved in, cuffing Ryan and separating Travis and Caleb. Travis protested loudly. Caleb said nothing, eyes fixed on the floor. Ethan knelt beside Rex briefly, checking for injuries. The dog's fur was ruffled, but no blood, no visible harm. Rex leaned his head briefly against Ethan's thigh. As Ryan was lifted to his feet, still restrained, Hayes turned to Travis. "Keep the recording," he said quietly. "We'll need it." Ethan stood, shoulders squared, pulse returning to baseline. He had not struck first. He had not escalated. But the line had shifted. Inside Travis's live stream recording, Ryan's threat remained preserved in full. Rain fell in thin, steady lines over Bozeman the morning after the warehouse arrest, turning the streets slick and reflective. Ethan stood inside his garage, sleeves rolled up, hands blackened with grease, but his focus drifted far from the engine block in front of him. Rex lay near the office door, watchful as always, though the dog's breathing had finally settled into its normal rhythm after the night's chaos. The image of Ryan's words, "If he loses the dog, next he loses the kid," still echoed in Ethan's mind, not as fear, but as a calculation. Officer Hayes arrived just after 9, his expression more serious than usual. He removed his rain-dampened jacket and set a folder on Ethan's desk. "It's bigger than we thought," Hayes said. He flipped the folder open to printed screenshots, social media accounts, usernames, donation histories. Ryan and Travis have been running multiple live stream channels. They stage confrontations, harassment, property damage. The more extreme the situation, the more donations they receive. Ethan scanned the pages without visible reaction. Comments from viewers had scrolled by during the warehouse stream, egging Ryan on, sending small digital payments in real time. Hayes continued. "We traced at least 4 prior incidents in neighboring counties. Minor assaults, vandalism, intimidation. Nothing stuck because victims declined to press charges or lacked proof." Ethan nodded once. "And Caleb?" Hayes exhaled. "We brought him in for questioning this morning." Caleb Dunn sat in the interrogation room at the Bozeman Police Department, looking smaller than Ethan remembered. Under fluorescent light, his pale skin appeared almost translucent, freckles faint across a narrow nose. His sandy hair hung unwashed over anxious blue eyes. He wore a thrift store hoodie 2 sizes too large, sleeves pulled down past his wrists like armor. Caleb's hands shook as he spoke. Not from defiance, but from the kind of fear that comes from wanting to belong and realizing too late where belonging can lead. "I didn't think it would go that far," Caleb confessed, voice cracking. "Ryan said it was just content, just views. He paid me to leave the back door unlocked that night. Said they were going to film a prank. I swear I didn't cut the brake line." Detective Laura Kim sat across from him, calm and composed. She was in her mid-30s, with straight black hair tucked neatly behind her ears and sharp, observant eyes that missed nothing. Her demeanor was steady, almost maternal, but there was steel beneath it. Years in property crimes had taught her patience. "Did Ryan talk about hurting anyone?" she asked evenly. Caleb swallowed hard. "He said the mechanic needed to be taught a lesson. That's all." Meanwhile, another development unfolded unexpectedly. Around noon, Hayes received a call from Linda Marsh, the woman whose young son had been frightened in the café. Linda, 36, with warm brown skin and tightly coiled dark hair pulled into a low bun, worked 2 jobs to support her 7-year-old son, Tommy. Her voice trembled slightly over the phone, but determination held it steady. "I found something," she said. Linda had returned to the café owner, Marcus Holloway, a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s with weathered features and a Marine Corps tattoo faded on his forearm, to ask about security footage. Marcus had stored a backup copy of the entire café recording. He handed it to Linda after learning about the edited video circulating online. When Hayes played the full footage inside Ethan's office, the narrative changed completely. It showed Ryan shoving first. It showed the kicked chair. It showed the terrified child. It showed Ethan waiting, absorbing, then responding only when necessary. The truth existed in full context. Hayes leaned back. "This helps your custody case." As if summoned by the word custody, Ethan's phone buzzed. It was Daniel Reeves again, his voice strained but hopeful. "The judge has agreed to postpone the custody hearing pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. That buys us time." Time. Ethan had learned that time could either mend or fracture. Later that afternoon, Ryan was released under strict conditions. No contact with Ethan, no approach within 500 feet of his home or business. A restraining order was filed. However, the charges remained misdemeanors until prosecutors could connect the brake sabotage directly to him. Without proof of who cut the line, felony charges could not yet be applied. Across town, Ryan stood outside the auto parts store where he worked part-time. His father, Charles Mercer, arrived in a polished gray sedan. Charles was a man in his late 50s, tall and impeccably groomed, silver hair combed back sharply from a stern face lined with both age and pride. He owned several commercial properties in the county and had donated generously to local political campaigns. But today, his jaw was tight with visible disappointment. Witnesses later said the conversation between father and son was brief and heated. Charles's voice carried none of Ryan's volatility. It was cold, clipped, final. "I will not bail you out again," he reportedly said. "Not for this." Then he drove away, leaving Ryan standing alone in the rain. That evening, Emma sat at the small kitchen table in Ethan's house, homework open but forgotten. She looked older than 12 in the dim light, worry sharpening her features. "Dad?" she asked quietly. "Are we safe?" The question was simple. The answer was not. Ethan sat across from her, hands folded, eyes steady. He could promise protection. He could promise vigilance. But safety was never absolute. It was earned daily. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand gently. "I won't let anyone hurt you," he said finally. He did not mention the live stream network, the escalating recklessness, or the fact that Ryan Mercer now had nothing left to lose. Across town, Ryan stared at his phone, notifications dwindling as followers shifted attention elsewhere. For the first time, he understood that humiliation cut deeper when it was public and permanent. Inside Ethan's kitchen, the rain tapped softly against the window as Emma held her father's hand, waiting for reassurance that could never be fully spoken. 7 days after the warehouse arrest, the air over Bozeman carried the first sharp hint of early winter, crisp and metallic against the lungs. The morning had begun quietly at Cole Auto Repair. Ethan had allowed Emma to spend the afternoon there for the first time in weeks, partly because the restraining order gave him measured confidence, partly because he refused to let fear dictate routine. Emma sat at a small folding table near the office door, long dark hair tied into a loose braid over one shoulder, headphones resting around her neck. She was tall for 12, her features still soft but increasingly defined, hazel eyes observant in ways that reminded Ethan painfully of Sarah. She sketched absent-mindedly in a notebook, drawing engines she did not fully understand but wanted to. Rex lay beside her chair, head lifted, ears alert. Since the warehouse incident, the dog's vigilance had sharpened. At 7 years old, his muscles remained strong, his coat thick and glossy, despite the notch in his ear and faint scars beneath his fur. His loyalty had always been absolute, but now it carried edge. Around 4 in the afternoon, Ethan stepped out from under a lifted truck, wiping his hands on a rag. That was when he heard the engine, loud, uneven, revving too high for a parking maneuver. A black pickup skidded into the lot, tires squealing against gravel. Rex was on his feet instantly. Ryan Mercer climbed out, movements jerky, unsteady but fueled by something stronger than alcohol this time. He looked worse than a week ago. Dark circles under reddened eyes, blonde hair unwashed and falling into his face. His once athletic build now carried tension like a coiled wire pulled too tight. In his right hand he held a red gasoline can. In his left, his phone, camera already active. "Hey, Bozeman," he shouted toward the screen. "Watch this. Marine losing everything." Ethan's gaze flicked briefly toward Emma. She had already stood, frozen but silent. He moved subtly so that his body stood between her and the garage entrance. Ryan staggered forward, sloshing gasoline carelessly across the concrete. The sharp smell filled the air instantly. "You think you won?" Ryan barked. "You think my dad abandoning me changes anything?" The words revealed more than Ryan intended. Ethan understood then. Humiliation had stripped away the protective illusion of wealth and influence. Charles Mercer's refusal to bail his son out again had cut deeper than any bruise. "Put the can down," Ethan said calmly, voice steady but firm. "Walk away." Ryan laughed, eyes wild. "Or what? You gonna slam me again?" He raised the can as if to tip it fully across the shop floor. Before Ethan moved, Rex lunged forward, not at Ryan's throat, but at the can itself. The dog's body struck Ryan's arm with calculated force. The gasoline container flew sideways, clattering across the floor, its contents spilling harmlessly across already damp gravel rather than the oil-soaked interior. The phone slipped from Ryan's grip and skidded under a workbench, camera still streaming at an angle. Ryan roared in frustration and charged. His fist came forward, fast and desperate, lacking form. Ethan did not sidestep this time. He stepped in. His left forearm deflected the strike, absorbing impact against muscle rather than bone. His right hand seized Ryan's collar, pulling him forward while shifting weight through his hips. The motion was efficient, economical. Years of Marine training refined through painful discipline. Ryan's balance collapsed. Ethan pivoted and drove him down hard onto the concrete, controlling the descent to prevent head injury, but ensuring dominance. This was not the measured restraint of the café or the warehouse. This was finality. Ethan pinned Ryan face down, one arm twisted securely behind his back, knee centered between shoulder blades. Emma stood several feet away, hands clenched at her sides but not screaming. She watched her father with wide, frightened eyes, yet she did not see rage there. She saw something steadier. Ryan struggled once, twice, then stilled under pressure. "You ruined my life," he spat. "You did that yourself," Ethan replied evenly. Sirens approached within minutes. Hayes arrived with 2 additional officers, boots striking pavement in quick succession. Detective Laura Kim followed behind, expression sharp and analytical. Hayes took in the scene, the spilled gasoline, the live-streaming phone, Ryan restrained. "Ryan Mercer," Hayes said firmly, cuffing him. "You're under arrest for criminal threats, violation of a restraining order, and attempted property damage." Ryan's shoulders sagged once the cuffs clicked into place. The defiance drained out of him, leaving only exhaustion. Detective Kim retrieved the fallen phone and glanced at the ongoing stream. "We have everything," she said quietly. As officers escorted Ryan toward the cruiser, Charles Mercer's gray sedan turned slowly into the lot. He stepped out, coat immaculate, posture rigid as steel. His gaze moved from his son, in handcuffs, to Ethan, standing protectively before his daughter. Something shifted in the older man's face. Not anger, not denial.
but resignation. Hayes approached him briefly.
"He'll be held pending arraignment," Hayes said. "Given the violation and threats, bail may not be automatic." Charles Mercer nodded once, jaw tight. "I won't be signing anything this time."
His voice was clipped, final. He did not look at his son again before driving away. Emma walked slowly toward Ethan after the cruisers left. "Dad," she whispered, "are we still safe?" Ethan crouched, hands resting on her shoulders. His pulse had steadied, adrenaline no longer shook his fingers. He looked into her hazel eyes and saw fear, but also trust. "Yes," he said quietly. "Now we are." Rex pressed close against Emma's leg, tail lowered but calm. The spilled gasoline smell lingered faintly in the air, but no flames had risen. No one had been injured. The line had held.
Inside the patrol car, Ryan Mercer stared forward as the door closed. Across town, his father's decision ensured he would remain there, at least for now. 3 months later, early winter settled gently over Bozeman, laying a thin frost across rooftops and turning the mountains into quiet blue silhouettes against the sky. Cole Auto Repair looked different now, not larger, not newer, but steadier. The rear door had been reinforced with steel framing. New cameras watched each corner of the property, their small red indicators blinking with calm vigilance. Inside, the concrete floors were clean, the tool walls reorganized with a precision that bordered on military. Stability had returned in layers, one repair at a time. Ethan stood beneath a lifted pickup, tightening a bolt with deliberate control. At 45, the lines around his eyes had deepened slightly, but the tension that once lived permanently in his shoulders had softened. The court proceedings had taken weeks. Statements, evidence, full footage from the café, the warehouse live stream, the gasoline threat. Each piece had stacked neatly into a pattern no judge could ignore. Ryan Mercer stood in court one final time, wearing a gray suit that did not quite fit his broad frame. The arrogance had drained from him. His blonde hair was trimmed short again, as if discipline could be restored through appearance alone. The judge issued probation, mandatory counseling, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent restraining order extending 5 years. No prison time, but no immediate freedom either. His father sat in the back row, silent, expression carved from stone. When the sentence was read, Charles Mercer did not react. He had already withdrawn his financial shield. That absence would shape Ryan more than any jail cell. Caleb Dunn received a lesser sentence, misdemeanor complicity in property damage, probation, restitution payments. In court, Caleb looked thinner than ever, shoulders bent forward, as though apologizing to the air. He had confessed fully, and Detective Laura Kim testified that his cooperation helped strengthen the case. Caleb had been desperate to belong, not malicious. The judge ordered him into vocational counseling. Whether he would rise from it remained uncertain, but at least the path existed. The custody hearing followed 2 weeks later. Margaret Whitmore sat upright as always, silver hair precisely styled, hands folded in her lap. Yet something had shifted in her posture. Less resistance, more contemplation. Emma sat beside Ethan this time, not at her grandmother's side. Daniel Reeves presented the complete timeline with careful precision. Officer Hayes testified to Ethan's restraint under provocation. Linda Marsh offered a brief but heartfelt statement about the café incident and the safety Ethan had ensured. When the judge announced that primary custody would be awarded to Ethan Cole, effective immediately, the words did not crash like thunder. They settled like snow. Quiet. Definitive. Emma squeezed her father's hand once, hard. Margaret nodded slowly, grief and acceptance blending in her pale blue eyes. She had lost a daughter. She would not lose a granddaughter. That evening, the house on the edge of town felt warmer than it ever had. Emma's belongings filled the spare bedroom, posters of distant galaxies, stacks of notebooks, a small potted succulent she insisted could survive anything. Rex moved between rooms as if inspecting each change personally. The dog was older now, muzzle beginning to silver slightly, but his body remained strong, movements fluid and controlled. He lay down in the living room as Ethan and Emma assembled a bookshelf together. Later, after dinner, Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, chin resting on her hands. "Dad?" she asked softly. "Why didn't you just hurt him when you could?" The question was not accusatory, it was curious. She had watched him during the final confrontation, had seen the efficiency, the contained power. Ethan sat opposite her, forearms resting on his knees. He thought briefly of Sarah, of her tall, slender figure moving through hospital corridors with quiet grace, chestnut hair catching sunlight through a window. She had possessed a kind of strength that required no volume. He heard her voice as clearly as if she stood beside him now. "Because real strength," Ethan said slowly, "is knowing when to stop." Emma studied him for a moment, as if measuring the weight of that statement. Then she nodded once, satisfied. Rex shifted and lay down between them, his broad back forming a living bridge. Outside, snow began to fall lightly, covering the repaired driveway in a soft, white layer. Ethan stood and looked through the window, watching flakes drift downward. The Marine inside him had never disappeared. It had simply matured. Discipline had replaced reaction. Purpose had replaced pride. The garage would open again tomorrow morning, engines needing repair, customers arriving with small problems that could be solved by careful hands. Life would move forward without spectacle. Ryan Mercer would complete his community service hours cleaning roadside debris under supervised watch, a reminder that attention earned through harm fades quickly. Caleb would attend vocational classes, uncertain but given another chance. Margaret would visit on Sundays, bringing homemade bread and cautious smiles. Ethan felt no triumph, only steadiness. He had held the line when it mattered, not with fury, not with destruction, but with control. Emma turned on a small lamp near the couch and picked up her sketchbook again. Rex exhaled deeply and closed his eyes. Ethan lowered himself into the chair beside them, listening to the quiet house settle into its new shape. The kind of strength that stays does not announce itself. It remains when noise fades. It protects without demanding recognition. And in that stillness, Ethan understood that survival was not the greatest achievement of his life. Fatherhood was. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or bright light. Sometimes they come quietly, in the form of restraint, second chances, and the strength to choose mercy over anger. God does not always remove the storm, but He steadies the hands that must stand inside it. In our daily lives, the greatest victories are not loud. They are the moments we refuse to become what hurt us. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment with your thoughts, subscribe for more stories of strength and grace, and may God bless you and your family with protection, peace, and quiet miracles in the days ahead.